Well, my name is Paul Decelles, and I'm professor of biology here at the college, and I'm here at the storm retention area that's just off campus by the parking lots. It may not sound like a glamorous spot, but it's actually one of my favorite places on campus because it's one of the few places around here where you can see lots of native vegetation. The whole area is designed to capture the storm water that's coming off the parking lots and filter out a lot of the pollution, and also slow down the release of the water to Indian Creek where it ends up. And as part of that system, they planted a lot of native vegetation, which is great because it attracts a lot of insects and honeybee, not only honeybees, but lots of native insects as well. And it's just a wonderful place to visit, quite frankly, at just about any time of the year. Okay, one of the great native plants that we have around here is aster. And it makes these nice, like purplish or lavender type flowers depending on the kind of aster. And it's in the same family of plants as sunflowers. Aster means star, and it's just a wonderful plant. And you can see behind me how it's just kind of all in bloom here, just taking over the whole area. It's just a wonderful native plant, attracts a lot of native bees as well as honeybees. And so it's just a wonderful, wonderful plant, one of my favorite plants. And if we had been out here last week, the colors would have been a lot more intense, but these are still pretty good colors for this time of year. It's one of the last things to bloom, and we're getting ready to have a frost, so probably next week these guys will be pretty much over. But so you might get out and see them where you still can. Well, as I was saying, this area has been planted mainly with native vegetation and from the prairie. But if you had come out here last year, quite frankly, you wouldn't have seen so much native vegetation because there were a lot of weedy, invasive plants that had gotten in. And a lot of those are pretty much gone. One exception is this guy down here, which is called bindweed. It's kind of morning glory. And, well, it has kind of pretty flowers. If left to itself, it'll just kind of choke everything out. But it's on retreat right now, so it's not as abundant as it was last year. And there are also several other non-native things that were really abundant last year that I'm not seeing so much of this year. Over here, we have a very almost signature Kansas plant beyond the sunflower. This is what is called Kansas gay feather, and these stalks that come up are just full of little purple flowers when they bloom. And even when they're not in bloom, they have sort of a nice attractiveness to them. And so it's really nice that this is taken off. So this is a good plant to see when you come out here in the middle of the summer when they're in full bloom. And a wonderful plant. A few other plants over here. This one, most people are probably familiar with, but again, it's a native plant. This is black-eyed Susan or Rudbeckia. Just a wonderful native plant. Unfortunately, you can see that this one is kind of being a little bit choked out by these bindweed plants that are here, but it's just a wonderful native plant. This has been a really great year for aster. I know I have aster in my garden at home, and it's about this tall. Normally it only gets about this tall. And the one thing that's intriguing me about the aster that's here is the difference in color. So right here I have some that are really pale pink. Over there are some that are more intense in color, and there are even some over here that are kind of mixed in that are sort of bluish in color rather than the more intense pink color. And I'm not sure why that is, whether that's due to just the blooming time or maybe differences in the soil, or perhaps there are genetic differences between the plants. So, even in a situation like this, you can get all sorts of interesting questions about the plants that are here and about their visitors too. One of my favorite plants that's here is this one. This is goldenrod, and a lot of you have probably seen goldenrod, and it kind of gets a bum rap because a lot of people will tell me, including my wife, she will say, I'm allergic to goldenrod, so don't ever plant it in my garden. Well, I cheated. I got some, and I called it by its scientific name, which is solidago. And a lot of people think it's a major allergy-causing plant, but it really doesn't. The pollen is way too heavy to be carried by wind, and so but it gets a bum rap when people should be blaming ragweed for their pollen issues. But it's a wonderful plant because when it's in full bloom, it attracts a lot of different insects that are pretty much specialized for this particular plant. And so, but now unfortunately it's well past its prime, so we'll have to wait till next year to see that. One of the purposes of this whole area is to remove pollutants and purify the water that's coming off from the parking lots on campus. And I'm standing here, and one of the first things that happens, we have this layer of stone that filters out some of the big stuff that comes in from the parking lot. And I just want to point out that I wasn't out here yesterday, but one of my friends was, but apparently yesterday, when we had a lot of rain, this whole area was just full of water. So the idea is to filter the pollutants out, retain the water for a while so that it doesn't get emptied into Indian Creek all at once. And so the retention area filled up, and you can still see there's a fair amount of water down in the bottom. I don't know if you can make that out among all the vegetation, but it looks like there's, you know, maybe 6 or 8 inches of water still remaining in this lower area. So there's still some water here, but most of it's drained out. So the idea is to retain the water and enable the plant roots to help filter out pollutants and that sort of thing, but not retain the water so long that it becomes stagnant. So the water's retained for a while, then it's released down and ends up in Indian Creek, hopefully a lot cleaner than what it started as. Okay, well, some more from some familiar plants that are here, aside from the sunflower type things. Right here we have daylilies. I came out here in the summertime, and they have nice orange lily blossoms. A lot of you are probably familiar with these plants. You may have them in your garden. Another plant that you're probably familiar with is this one here. This is called redbud. And this is the tree that produces those nice pink blossoms in the spring. They're just little tiny blossoms. The blossoms come out before the leaves do. And so it's a very common plant, but it's a native plant and it spreads pretty easily. So I'm kind of interested to see that it's come into this particular spot. I don't think this plant was planted here. I think it came in on its own. And you can see already it's probably only a couple years old. It's getting to be a pretty good sized plant. It's a wonderful, wonderful plant, but I'm sure everybody's familiar with it. Okay. Again, I'm not an expert on grasses, but I really like this grass that's here. But the reason I came down here was to point out this plant with these light blue flowers. This is not a native plant. It's what is called chicory. It's the plant that, you know, they use in New Orleans. They grind up the roots and add it to coffee, I think as an extender more than anything else. And it's a plant that I'm familiar with as an introduced plant back east, and it's been slowly making its way further west. And so here it is, a non-native plant. It's still a wonderful plant, even though it's not a native plant. Again, attracts a lot of bees. There's really interesting bright blue pollen as well. So it's, again, this is chicory, not a native plant. This is the plant they use in New Orleans when they make coffee. Right here, these are well past. This is what's called purple coneflower, and when they're in bloom, they have bright sort of pinkish petals and kind of an orangey center. And there are a lot of varieties of this plant that you can get for your garden, but I quite frankly like the native one best. And so after the flowers are dead, they have these really nice seed heads, and you can get seeds of this plant and you can start them and grow them in your garden. So it's just a wonderful, wonderful plant. Again, a native. In the same family as sunflowers, by the way. Okay, well, I guess it's time to head back to work. So we just took a short walk, and I strongly recommend you just come out and visit and walk around. It's a good place to get some exercise, and I wouldn't even wait until summer. I think that this place has beauty no matter what time of year you're at. So feel free to come on out and visit anytime you want.